Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of The Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions and the people behind them. My name is Nicolas Zart, and I will be your host today. And today I have, can you guess, another special guest. Of course, we always have special guests here, but this one is, again, special in a special way, if I can say that. I met Kevin Noertker at the CEO and co-founder of Ampaire. The other co-founder is Corey Combs in about 2018, and started to interview them in 2019. And Ampaire was already different from the get-go. Everyone was focusing on electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft eVTOLs. Everybody was focusing on vertiports. Everyone was focusing on battery operated aircraft. But Kevin and Corey said, no, let's be practical about it. Let's be pragmatic about it. The best thing to do is to start with a hybrid powertrain. Of course, not a lot of people believed in that. And all the hype was around eVTOLs and UAM, which then was starting to become more AAM. Long story short, you don't need to worry about that. I've filmed something about that before. Back then, they were working on a Cessna 337, which is an interesting aircraft in its configuration. It has two propellers, but one and the other behind, one in front, one behind. And it became an easy platform to put an electric motor in the front and a gasoline engine behind, or vice versa. Lo and behold, today, 7 years later, well, they're working on a lot of different things. They're working on King Airs, they're working on Caravans, they're working on a lot of different aircraft, and also working with the Department of Defense in the United States to give their powertrain more room to grow. And of course, it has a lot of room to grow because it's fitting all the way up now to King Air, and we can assume it's going to go much further. So have a look at this video, have a look at this interview, because it's really interesting that Ampaire stuck through their ideal and stuck through their ethics and what makes them ethical. And as Kevin says, more than once, he was coached to say, yes, we're going to go for hydrogen. Yes, we're going to go for batteries. But it wasn't the case. And they could have had a lot more money, but they decided not to. And they decided to continue and stick to their guns. And that makes Ampaire a very unique company in our industry. And so I'm very proud to introduce Kevin on this podcast. And Corey, I know you're watching. I'd love to have you on that podcast because I know you've got a lot of great things to say. And hopefully sooner than later. So without further ado, let's listen to Kevin talk about Ampaire and what Ampaire has done, where it's coming from, and where it's going, and you'll be surprised. All right, well, Kevin, please tell us a little bit about you. And I know you have so many things to say, so my mind is exploding already.
Well, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me. I'm Kevin Noertker. I'm co-founder and CEO of Ampaire, a Los Angeles-based company that's building the future of power for aviation. We're really focused in on the engines that'll drive the next generation of planes and upgrade all those planes that are currently out there today.
And I love what you just said there, because this is something. So for those of you who don't know, I've known Kevin for many years, right? I think it was around 2018, 2019 when we first started talking. We went to your little hangar, and which was use office, right? Weren't you in use office or something like that?
Yeah.
And you were working on a 333 already, and there was the Iron Bird on the side. And I remember you talking about, putting this propeller here with gasoline, this one here with electricity, and then swapping it around. And you guys were doing some pretty incredible work, and nobody else was. Nobody else was hybridizing airplanes like that.
Yeah, so way back then, when I remember the very first time when you visited our Hawthorne hangar, it was right around the time of Ampaire's first flight. Like this is over half a decade ago, right? In 2019, when
That's
we
true.
were upgrading the Cessna Skymaster, so the Cessna 337, which is such an interesting plane because it is a twin engine, but twin inline. So you have one in the back and one in the front, kind of a push-pull configuration. But perfect flight test bed, right? So again, focused on where the future of aviation propulsion is headed, it's really important to be able to test it all the way through flight. And this integrated inline test bed enabled us to actually test out a brand new propulsion type by removing that engine and then integrating, fully electric drivetrain on one, combustion on the other, create a hybrid aircraft architecture. And zooming forward over the subsequent
Yes.
over 5 years now, 5.5 since that first flight. That plane took lots of flights here in California, but then we took it to Hawaii and deployed on the islands with Mokulele Airlines, doing one of their EAS routes on the route to Hana on Maui. That was really exciting. Took the same plane, the Cessna Skymaster hybrid, took it out to the UK. And so we were up in the Orkney Islands, again, like majestic place to be flying. And again,
Yep.
communities
Yep.
that really, really need aviation, right? It's not just about advanced technology, about the impact that you can create. And aviation for a lot of these areas is truly a lifeline. And same plane we took out to Oshkosh Air Show, flew around. We took it up to Alaska and flew through Canada, and I mean got like rained on into Yukon and had to make sure that everything was fine. Like real rugged reality of it. Had a flight where we had to divert away. Like it was like a 200-mile divert. Like it's just a lot of real rugged reality for our planes. And of course now building the larger turboprop class propulsion is it's going really well for us.
And I hope I can remember all the questions I want to ask you, because there were so many things that we talked about back then that actually have happened. Yeah, tell us about what you're working on right now, and hopefully I will remember everything that you've talked about right now.
Good stuff. So, Ampaire, if you zoom way out, right, there's this amazing opportunity happening in aviation today, which is much like, whether it's the dawn of powered flight or the jet age, this opportunity is driven by new propulsion technology. And new propulsion technology enables all sorts of advancements in how we fly and how it affects the economy and how it affects the world. And so really focused in on what electrification, thoughtfully applied, can do for aviation. And so that electrification, what we see is hybrid electric. So hybrid being two systems combined. The two systems we've chosen are combustion plus electric vehicle, so lithium-ion battery-based electric vehicle. And this enables us to really optimize the fuel efficiency of the system across the various phases of flight. So our big focus as a company is to build these turboprop class engines that integrate into actually the existing turboprop class planes. There are tens of thousands of these planes that are out there. You can see one here over my shoulder, the Cessna Grand Caravan. Prolific planes. They're like the pickup trucks of the world.
Yeah.
And they fly all sorts of missions, a lot of essential services, a lot of cargo, a lot of passenger. And so we're re-engineering those planes to save 50% of the fuel burn. And that's really the beauty of what we're doing, is that imagine, like, put yourself in the year 2000 and you're looking at getting an electrified car. Right, that's right around when the Prius was coming out, and there's a genius behind the Prius, which was that you could drive that car anywhere you wanted to go. There was no range anxiety. It actually extended the drive range over basic combustion cars, and there was no like infrastructure anxiety around where will you plug in. So it's just kind of like better fuel efficiency. And that genius is what we're trying to leverage and put into our hybrid systems for planes, which is the same kind of operating thing, where the type of hybrid can self-charge the batteries during cruise, boosts power with the electric system when you need a lot of power, and then is super fuel efficient on a combustion engine during cruise. And that's really where we're entering the market. And what Ampaire's first product is that turboprop class integrated parallel hybrid architecture, and then a lot of exciting opportunities that branch off from there.
Yeah, that I'm excited to hear, because I know you guys have been working on a lot of things, including with the DoD. So that's interesting. But you made a really good point. I think so to go back to 1999, both Honda and Toyota after hours, these guys were working on ways of making the venerable opposing piston engine a little bit more efficient, because the biggest problem we have, whether we're on the road, in the air, and even on the sea, by the way, it's just the starting up. That's what burns a lot of fuel, especially for airplanes. These guys are meant to be flying thousands of feet in the air, so they're optimized for that kind of, they're not optimized to take off or even land. Same thing with cars. So their solution, and by the way, Honda beat Toyota by 6 months with their hybrid Insight, which was really funny. So they came out first, but they're whatever, they're still fighting. But their idea was very simple. Look, we have a starter engine. Let's just get a bigger electric motor, and it'll help it shoulder the burden of starting the engine, which is basically what you guys are doing. Again, engines are not good at sea level. They're not good at taking off and everything. They're meant to cruise up there. So using electricity, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolutely no-brainer.
Yeah, and this is the really interesting opportunity, is to understand actually how are these engines used. Like in aviation, especially this category of plane, you have a duty cycle, like a power utilization cycle, where during takeoff and climb, you need, call it peak power, a lot of power.
Yep.
And then during cruise, you actually need pretty modest power. It's like 60, 65%. And so a thermal or combustion engine, just like the physics of it, you can't really optimize that engine for both of those operating points. And so this is where hybrid systems are great, because you can actually give yourself full efficiency at both operating points. And it means that, like, even though when we're cruising on like the Cessna Grand Caravan hybrid, which we call the Eco Caravan, when we're cruising on the Eco Caravan, it's a combustion only cruise. And yet, because we've been able to optimize that combustion engine for that cruise power setting and pick the right kind of engine for it, we're able to save a significant amount of fuel, just combustion compared to combustion. And then, of course, the electric boost for takeoff and climb, and any added power that you need, is also not burning additional fuel. So you're looking at 70% fuel savings on takeoff and climb. 70%.
Wow.
And then on average, like 50% savings for your total mission set. And that's that's really powerful, because one of the contrarian views I took really early on with Ampaire, but it's becoming much more commonplace now in the world, especially here in the United States, is I've always said, like, in order to be scalable and impactful, you have to have better baseline economics than the incumbent solution. You cannot just be better for the environment. You actually have to be better for business. And that's through the fuel savings. And this is really coming full circle, because those fuel savings and the improved performance, you can double the range of the plane if you wanted to fly real far. Like, that's some pretty compelling stuff.
Yeah, you said so many things that are true. Remember a few years ago, all the airline companies were hailing sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, right? And everything. Did you see the news? The last 6 months, they're all dumping it, because, it hasn't scaled. It's not financially profitable. That's so the one thing we got to do. You also said something I remember, and that always stuck in my mind, because you were talking about, especially these island, like Hawaii, Philippines, Singapore, all these places like that, Indonesia. ATRs, or those multiple propellers, or those twin propellers, were wonderful for these little hubs. They're perfectly ideally suited for that. But slowly they were scaled out to introduce 737s and A320, whatever, which to this day, sometimes when I fly from Savannah to Atlanta, by the way, it's a fully packed 757 that barely reaches 18,000 feet. And comes back down again. Can you imagine the compression, decompression? I mean, they're killing that poor guy, and there's no replacement for that. So your solution now opens up not only, again, the routes that we had to close, but now opens up more routes, more flexibility, and you don't always need to have 130 to 200 and some plus 737, A320 capacity all the time. Now you can have more flights and quieter and so on and so forth, and you're hitting, like you said, all the eco points on top of it. So that's fantastic. I remember this, and I still use this to this day on my talks. It's like, imagine now what we can do. I have to drive 2.5 hours to get to Augusta because there's no train, there's no plane, and it's just back roads.
And you look at it and like there was this this fun saying in aviation that like the cheapest innovation to improve the economics is just to add an extra seat to the airplane. And that's what you've
Boom.
seen is just packing more and more paying passengers into the vehicles, reducing the number of flights and aggregating passengers onto bigger and bigger airplanes was a trend
Yep.
for a very long time.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
and this really interesting opportunity of like, what if you could, for the same economics, fly the 2 flights, and for the same or better environmental impact, fly 2 or more, and that starts to unlock increased frequencies, increased convenience,
Yes.
and better pricing lead to this like snowball effect in the market, and the benefit that can bring to communities. You talk about communities that have lost their service.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
there's this
Yes.
whole idea in the United States of the flyover states. Well, why are they flyover states? And it's because major airlines can't justify as frequent
Right.
of service to those communities. And many communities, if you look at the utilization of airports, of like commercially ready airports, it's vastly
Yeah.
underutilized infrastructure, right? It's far less than
Absolutely.
10%. It's probably like
Yes.
5% or lower.
It's ridiculous.
And so you're like, well, why? And it comes down to the economics. And so this idea of like the improved economics, improving connectivity. Like I love going to these when we fly our planes to these communities, and you realize like the small mom and pop shop that wants to be
Yes.
better connected to the global economy, or the agricultural group that just can't justify shipping some perishable item into a global footprint, so you can only get the specific, unique, amazing product local. Now all of a sudden we might be able to better connect the world, and that from an impact standpoint, like that social economic impact, is almost as exciting, in many ways even more exciting and personal than the climate impact that we help as well.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny because you're also answering the failed beginning of urban air mobility, but at the same time, you're reaching into regional air mobility. And we had Clint Harper not too long ago also on the podcast where we talked about, these regional airports are underused, right? They're underutilized and they have a lot of
Mhm.
space, by the way. So if you want to do SAF or hydrogen, whatever, you do it. You can do it, right? There's space to do that. But also that they were meant to be little hubs, right? And then, of course, we see more and more bigger airplanes. Of course, they can't land in everything like that. So you're reopening these routes. And you're right, the social economic aspect of it is something that we don't. And very hard to, by the way, to get the metrics on that. But I do have a few other people, hopefully, I'll bring on because that needs to be said. You're right. You're opening up well, that original idea of urban air mobility, which now is
Mhm.
also regional air mobility. Another thing you said too that I wanted to highlight is you're right. There are always solutions to everything, right? We could easily build engines that are perfect for takeoff and climbing, and of course cruising engines. But then that becomes a little bit heavy, right? Well, you've got your solution right here. Electric motor is pretty darn small. You showed me, oh my gosh, what's in the nose of one of your airplanes, and well, what is it? It's about 80% of the space is saved. And
Yeah.
think about the energy density that's right in there. And all you have to do is just add that to actually even remove another engine and just add that. So space savings. And I can think of all kinds of reasons why that makes a lot of sense.
It's pretty magical. And then this is one of the things, and you mentioned urban air mobility, regional air mobility, advanced air mobility. There's like a lot of air mobilities out there. And what's exciting about it though is like the core belief in these things, I think, is founded in on pretty good ideas. The question is really around timing and how do you get there, and some of the logistics and the infrastructure and the market demand. There's a lot of uncertainty in those areas. And one of the
Yes.
things that I'm really excited about the path that we're forging here at Ampere is that I see this as the gateway to all of these other aspects of the industry. That, like, what do you need? You need supply chains that are mature, regulations that are understanding. You need insurance companies who know how to, like, what the risks are. You need lessors who can underwrite residual
Yes.
values and
Yes.
then you need, MROs who know how to handle the high voltage stuff, all the pilots that trust. So there's this vast infrastructure or ecosystem that needs to become familiar with these things. And I'm able to help all of those groups
Yes.
get really early access to the technology, to the systems, build up that institutional knowledge and comfort,
Right.
and then transition into whether it's fully electric or other forms of electrification, whether it's regional in an old plane or regional in a brand new plane, ultra short takeoff and landing, maybe it's even, eVTOL. All of these pathways down the road are supported by this ecosystem that we're able to build early without any of that uncertainty around timing and
That
or marketability.
Yeah, you said it so well. We met with a lot of airport planners and also route planners, right? And that's the biggest problem we have with purely battery driven eVTOLs, right? Is how do you fit that into what do they do last mile, what mile? But you fit perfectly in there. There's no disturbance. I mean, that makes perfect sense and everything. You also mentioned something that is really near and dear to me because we've been talking about two of the lacking segments in the industry. By the way, the Europeans call it innovative air mobility, which I kind of like that better because it wraps up everything really well together. But it's insurance, like you said, and then the fire marshals. We need the fire marshal. I'm on the infrastructure side of things, and oh my goodness, I think I've only seen maybe 2-3 companies who are really thinking about the fire
Yeah.
marshal because I would certainly hate to design those brand new terminals and all of a sudden go, whoops, can't put that door there, can't put this. There's another $50,000 we're just gonna have to ask, and hopefully somebody
Mhm.
will give us. That's not gonna be
It's
fun.
it's these corners of the ecosystem that it's not until you really work on what reality looks like that you start to think about them. Like I remember it was probably about 3 years ago we hosted the FAA's first responders team
Mm,
to our location over in Hawthorne, and over the course of a few days, we had about 450 firemen, first responders come
wow.
through, and we trained them on lithium-ion battery safety. And
Good.
of
Thank
those
you.
450 people, how many do you think had ever actually witnessed a lithium-ion battery fire? Two.
Oh,
Two out of 450. And it's not of their own fault. I mean, it's just about the context and what are you exposed to. And in aviation, these types of things are new and novel. So the idea of how do you prepare the ecosystem for this eventual progress in electrification? Well, there's some basic things that need to happen. And I'm really excited that we're able to pretty rapidly. I mean, imagine a hybrid that can drop into any fleet anywhere in the world and yet still be able to support whether the fire marshals or the first responders
yeah.
teams support that increased awareness. And you mentioned something around the deployment, which was really really interesting, and it reminds me of when we were looking to deploy in Hawaii. I was talking
Yes.
to an infrastructure person, and this person's whole existence, right, their business was to invest in sustainable like electrification infrastructure. And they asked me, now this is pretty early on, so 2018 probably. They asked me, Kevin, I only need to know two things for charging infrastructure. When do you need it, and how much do you need? And imagine answering that question for urban air mobility or fully electric. And so this is obviously a dynamic system with, so you're saying I need some growth over time. And they needed confidence in those numbers so they could go get financing, to kick off a 5-year infrastructure grid upgrade project. And the reality is most of the time there's way too much uncertainty around those basic question, the most basic question, like how much and when. And this was a really formative moment for us because that deployment in Hawaii showed us just how critical it was if we want to really have broad-based impact to have a
yeah.
solution that was infrastructure independent or no charging infrastructure
Yeah.
required, so
Yeah.
that we were able to eliminate all these chicken and the egg challenges and really get the products out there in front of folks efficiently and broadly.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of numbers since we last talked. Actually, that I found out is our predictions on energy, purely electricity usage, right? 10 years into the future, now we have drones, we have eVTOLs, we've got eSTOLs, eCTOLs, we got a lot of, everything is electric. And so for a fairly good side multi-port, right? So where you have regular traffic and then electric traffic, 10 to 50 megawatts of power, right? So I talked to a lot of utilities and they're like, oh, we'll give you regular. I'm like, so you're telling me that at 6 o'clock every evening, you can give me 10 to 50 megawatts that I know you can't produce and you can't transmit it. Neither that or those, because you know what? For the last few decades, you've been making a lot of money, which is great, but you haven't done anything to upgrade, to do anything, and now we're scrambling to get everything back online, but we don't even have the transmission. So you are answering that biggest problem right there.
And the hope is that by eliminating the bottleneck challenge, we're able to not avoid it, right? Not ignore it, but actually upgrade the infrastructure alongside the increased confidence in the market, right? And that's why our hybrids are plug-in optional, not plug-in. I just got a hybrid car, not plug-in. But the products that Ampaire is building right now are plug-in optional because we really think it's going to be important to roll out infrastructure alongside these things. And what an opportunity for infrastructure and airport developers and energy companies who want to get at the leading edge of electrification to come in at this broad leading edge of hybridization.
Yeah, and that's such a great point that you're making there too. My God, we could go on forever. Every time like you say something, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of. But the plug-in option actually is going to be very helpful in the colder territories, right? You have an early at 6 o'clock flight. That battery pack is not going to perform nearly as well. But you plug it in an hour before. I'm sure your battery packs are not too big anyway. You can get that going in a few hours, maybe an hour or something like that. And whammo, you're ready to hit the road with a fully fresh battery that will help you, and you're still going to get the same performance, the same fuel reduction in a very cold weather in the middle of the 5 o'clock in the morning flights, or they're horrible. So yeah, that's a very good point that you're making right there.
Yeah, and it's it's exciting when I think about how many communities around the world can benefit from these types of things. And also, over the years, when we founded the company in 2016, we were called crazy. And then in 2019, 20, 21, 22, when money was free and all it was kind of a hype boom around a bunch of exciting projects, we're upgrading existing planes hybrid, and yet others were talking about fully electric or eVTOL or other I'll call flashier things. And so we were asked, like, well, why are you why are not doing a moonshot? And now we see the world kind of recoiling back to looking for pragmatism, real pragmatism.
Yes.
And so it's what's nice is we've been on this steady trajectory over the better part of a decade now, and consistently delivering on those commitments. And while it's never been jumping onto the hype curve of the day, it has been consistently executing on like really good foundational principles that actually are really sound, both on the impact and the economics. And that gives me confidence that this has a whole lot of tailwinds flying behind it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that point, because it's something that I remember. I was on the bandwagon, right? So I have to admit it too. But when I finally met you guys, and right around that time also, Vertigo Aero was pivoting away from their eVTOL to, no, we're going to work on the propulsion system, which they adapted a very similar but different, pathway. The one thing that I've always loved about you guys, and you made perfect sense of it, is you were very wise in the way that you used your funds and your financial statements, right? I've noticed that, we've all noticed that for the last few years, last decade, very flashy PRs, right? Very flashing press release. I mean, rose-tainted glasses and everything. And so this last master class that we did here, because we're first and last one, but none the last one, there are going to be more, I was so happy, because you know what I heard from these airport people, these infrastructure people? Wow, finally sober teachers, sober people. And I said, yeah, no cheerleader here. We're talking about reality as it is. So I was always impressed about how you use your funds instead of just having flashy press releases that, in the way, by the way, press releases are designed to get people excited and to get investors. Okay, fine. So you're playing chess, you're playing long term, but you're also hurting the economy. I mean, hurting the whole industry, right? People think, they don't think. I go on Reddit and you can read some. Wow, I don't even know how to answer that one. So now you're right. People are coming back to the more pragmatic ways, and so that's one thing that I always wanted to ask you is why were you always so much more pragmatic with the way you were going to use your funds than a lot of these
Yeah.
other companies that and I've worked for some of them. Like it was just like a press release a week. It
Hmm.
was a factory.
I think it comes down to core values and core principles that are at the foundation. And I can tell the personal story behind it. Like, why would I make those decisions? And grew up in a like lower middle class family, knew that I had to go get scholarships in order to go to college.
Yeah.
And so was always foundationally frugal as just like on principle, like spending or waste is not my direction. And then as an engineers, and I'm a mechanical engineer in robotics out of Caltech, and so there's probably an element of just pragmatism that comes from that rather than kind of the flashier marketing side of things. But then really early on in my career, the first job that I had was in stealth technology research and development at Northrop Grumman.
Yes, I
And
remember.
so this is actually where I met my co-founder Corey. And we were tasked with taking all of this amazing technology that had been in the B2 and designing it for the 30 years later, designing it to be even better on all of the aspects that it needed to perform on, but then really focusing in on maintainability, supportability, mission availability. And so it was, and the overall economic impact of deploying an advanced technology. And so I learned really, really early on the importance of understanding that the system you're designing is not just a technical system, but all of the stakeholders and the life cycle implications of what you're doing. And that foundation, I didn't realize it at the time, was so and has been so formative. And I actually think a lot of that has now flowed into Ampaire in this idea of, from the very beginning, thinking through what are the repercussions of these decisions. Yes, the zero emissions sounds good, but if it cannot hit the range, if it cannot carry the payload, if it cannot be charged, if it cannot make the economics work because of a lack of scalability, then what is the impact you're really creating? And on the unit, it looks good, but on the scale, it looks poor. And that comes down to, MRO training and all the other things. So that's been pretty foundational. And I think that, when you have good principles, you can make your average decision is going to bias rolling the dice in your favor. And over time, it'll play out well. And I'd like to think that at Ampaire, we've been very consistent on our core principles and values, and that those, even down to the mission statement of the company that we set and verbalized in 2018, to be the world's most trusted developer of practical, compelling electrified aircraft. So trusted, practical, compelling. And those three words, if you look through history, and you're trying to figure out what are words that define Ampaire's actions and decisions and products, trusted, practical, compelling, you're going to see a lot of through lines there. And it's helped that we actually verbalized that really early on. And I think down to every team meeting, every board meeting, customer meetings, investor meetings, I begin with core values. And I think that that's built a little ecosystem around us where it's really been supportive and productive.
Yeah, it's true. It was always a pleasure when I was on the journalist side of things. It was always a pleasure talking to you guys or hearing from you guys, because I knew I wasn't going to have to sift through anything. I knew what you were putting out there was real. And I knew that you were one of the rare companies to hit all of your milestones, and not in a flashy way. Because honestly, when you read all these press releases, after a while, I mean, you're jaded. It's and it was really sad in the beginning. They were like, hey, we got billions of dollars. Whoa, we got $100 million, and then you're like, whoa, that's not a really good communication strategy. So you guys never, ever did that. And it was always wonderful hearing from you guys.
I appreciate that.
No, really, really. Tell us a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit, of course, as much as you can tell us about what you're working on in the near future? I know you've been working with DoD. Of course, there are things you're probably not going to tell us, but give us a
Sure.
little hint of what's happening.
Yeah, so we'll start with kind of where we are today and some of the exciting branches that that's taking. So, as I mentioned, hybrid electric engines that go into airplanes, right? So, the launch product is around a turboprop class engine that replaces the turboprop engines that are in most of the things like Cessna Grand Caravans, King Airs, which we've got an active project on. We've worked on Twin Otters in the past as
Yes.
well. And if you think about any categorically similar aircraft in this kind of 500 to 500 megawatt range, these are like going to be bread and butter for hybrid electric systems to replace. You can downscale that into some general
It's true.
aviation applications. Similarly, that adaptation goes really efficiently into some drone applications, unmanned systems for cargo, unmanned
Hmm.
systems for eVTOL, and for defense or dual use applications. And then you have the next step of when you have, instead of an integrated parallel hybrid, which is kind of a direct drive to a motor or a fan, you could do generators which provide
Right.
electricity that can be distributed. So you had mentioned our colleagues over at Vertigo, who have been doing a great job on these integrated generators for distributed electric propulsion
Yes.
on novel aircraft designs. Really exciting opportunities
Yeah.
in that space. The onboard power can also be used on board for other mission sets or reasons, whether that's for dual use payloads or even auxiliary power on aircraft. And then this is a pathway to actually scale up into the larger, from part 23 up to part 25 propulsion on regional jets and above. And so this is the power class where we begin and where we see it moving over time. And the beauty of it is that we're able to really stay focused as a company. I mean, there's so many shiny objects, it's sometimes hard, but we've been pretty good at staying really focused on what is the pathway, where are the branching functions, what are the decision points, and to have a really scalable opportunity. So specifically what's coming next for us, we're working really hard on the certification for our engine that's going into the Caravan.
Yes.
That certification is an upgrade of the airplane. So this is a supplement to the type certification
Good.
of the plane, supplemental type certification, and STC, for re-engineing the Cessna Grand Caravan with what we call our AMP H570. That's a 570 kilowatt equivalent hybrid electric propulsion system. A lot of words there, basically saying a new engine that burns half as much fuel in the Caravan. That will be, and right now it is the to our knowledge, the only certification program on a hybrid electric engine that's active with the FAA. Now, there are others who
Yeah.
talk about these things, but this is the only one that
Yeah.
actually exists. And as a result, every milestone we hit is a world's first. And so we recently got our G1 certification basis, which is really important and de-risks the regulatory
Yes.
pathway for us. We're making great progress toward our G2, which is called a means of compliance. Means of compliance being, how do you anticipate complying with the regulations? And then from there, you end up defining and running all of your tests, validating through the data, and ultimately getting that cert. And so we think we're 18 to 24 months away from getting that. And that will be the world's first company to get that type of a certification. And from there, I mean, scaling out production, managing all these the stakeholders in the ecosystem, coaching and educating a ton, building out the next generation of pilots, the next generation of maintainers and AMPs, and educating all the other stakeholders. So it's a lot of really hard and important work sitting in front of us, and I really want to do a good job of it, because it will likely set the precedent for how people see electrification.
Yeah, and there's something that's really near and dear to my heart, when we talk about certification, is you spell it out in no uncertain ways, right? When I hear things like, "Oh, we'll be certified next year," or "We'll be certified next year," well, all right, there are two different types of certifications out there, right? Prototype certification, yeah, you can do it. That's not a big deal. commercial certification. Wow, exponentially more expensive, exponentially more complicated, and it's never been done before. Whereas what your entryway is not only smoother, but you gave us a nice delineated, point by point on how you make it. And when you say in a year and a half to 2 years, I know you will do it for sure. Whereas with the others, I'm like, it depends on how you look at it, and it depends on a lot of different things.
I appreciate the confidence. And I think the one thing in this industry that holds back some companies, and to
Yep,
some extent it held back Ampere at
yep,
times, is the
yep,
availability of funding.
yep.
And
Well, yeah,
one
yes,
of the challenges that we face is that a lot of the folks who wanted to invest in advanced aviation invested in the hype, the excitement of it in previous
absolutely.
years. And honestly, they feel
Yeah,
that they were bait and switched. And that is not a productive thing. And so many of them won't even touch the industry anymore. And so it's on us to go find the people who are very thoughtful and have conviction, aren't just investing because it's exciting, but investing because they really see the big value. And that's it's like 18 months from when I close my next capital raise is definitely when we think we're going to be able to get this certification program completed. And I'm happy to say that the execution risk is relatively low on this one. So and one of the other things that I love about the fundraising process is it's my opportunity to build the team. It's not just about the full,
that's
the
true.
people
That's true.
putting in the elbow grease and actually full time. When I get to capital raise, I'm getting to build my broader team of advocates, of advisors, of like influence in the world, and bring really great people on board. And so that's just one of the joys that I have that counteracts the challenge of going out and of course finding these folks.
That's so true. That's you've you've said it out loud. This is the white elephant in the room, and especially for people who may or may not know, is that the early wave of investors that plunged billions of dollars already in that industry. 6 months later, a year later, they were saying, "Where are the returns?" Well, hey, this is aviation. It's a
Mhm.
decade usually. Remember the golden rule, right? A decade, 1,000 engineers, and $1 billion for one airplane, right? So of course, what we're working on here is not within the same, but it's still aviation. Things take time, and you have to be honest with these people. And you're right, there have been a lot of turnoffs, and we're sort of. I think personally, I think we're coming out of this winter of investors. We're starting to see maybe more savvy aviation savvy investors coming
Mhm.
back into this. And what do they do now? Well, they're staying away from the hype. They're going straight for the important things or the practical things, the pragmatic route. So I think Ampere is always perfectly placed for that. Absolutely.
I certainly agree that we're really well positioned for where the world is heading.
So usually right around now, and usually even before, but our conversations are really exciting. I ask more personal questions. One of them is, what the heck is wrong with you? What are you doing? Are you insane? A startup in the middle of aviation? You could get just a regular job somewhere and just call it a day. What motivates you to do these things? Because it's not easy and it's not for everyone. That's for sure.
Yeah, it certainly isn't easy. Like, and I sometimes joke with people that is like, I wish I loved something that was easier. Like
Yes.
entrepreneurship, you have to deeply, deeply believe in what you're doing, and it is an inevitable future. Like somebody is going to
Yep.
do this.
Yep.
And then you also
Yep.
have to believe that you have the capacity to go get it done yourself,
Yes.
maybe better, probably better than everyone else in the world. Like
Yep. Yep.
that's it's the entrepreneur's optimism that comes in. And so those are just foundational, right? So I have to deeply believe in, and I do, that electrification is going to change everything in this industry, just like we've seen it affect the other forms of transportation, and that I and my team are uniquely capable in the world of making really good decisions and executing well on that theory. And then from there, it really comes down to like surrounding yourself with good people. Like, what do any of us want in life, right? Like, I think we all have like
Simple.
going personal, like
Yes.
we all only have a little bit of time on earth, right? Like we're all going to be gone
Yes.
pretty soon. The
Yes.
mountains,
Yes.
the cliffs will fall and the seas will move. And like eventually we're all going to be out of here. And so what can you leave behind that's a bigger legacy than just the moments you spent? And I think that it matters. Like, and that maybe it's debatable whether the time we spend here and the impact we have matters. But when you look around the world and you realize that every single thing around us that is human made
Yes,
is the product of somebody who thought their time was being well spent doing that thing, then you
exactly.
realize it's the infinite, it's the sum of an infinite series where every infinitesimal unit doesn't matter, but in aggregate they do. And so you take your unit and you try to do as much as you can in the short time that you have. And so for me, I guide my time on some very simple principles. I use 3 key values as the literal metrics that I measure opportunity against. It's how meaningful, challenging, and visible. And so I'm looking for the most meaningful thing because, positive impact I think matters. Challenging because I think that's where I grow and where I'm motivated when I feel challenged. You can maximize your output when you're pushing right up against your limits. And then visible because I think there's a snowballing effect that happens in the world where I think about who I am today was because of the people who influenced me, the
Yes.
exposure that I got, the person who dared to do that big thing inspired me to go do something. Now, maybe I'll be so lucky to be that point of inspiration for someone else. And so the visibility can snowball. And so meaningful, challenging, visible is, I think, how you create a small dent in the right direction and that's certainly what keeps me motivated. And then, recently, within the last year, I had my first child. And so my daughter is delightful, and it certainly puts into perspective this continuum
Yes.
of
Yes.
humanity. And like, look, I'm
Yes.
not the first person to discover this, that like you end up being highly motivated to want to leave the world in a really good state so that your children can be better off than you were. And so I think it's the aggregation of all of these factors get me excited. I surround myself with good people, do meaningful, challenging, visible work, and hopefully when I look back on all this when I'm 100 years old, I look back on it with delight and fondness for the memories.
Kevin, I'm sure that will happen. I really like what you said. And one of the core foundations for me is I surround myself with people. It doesn't matter how high your IQ is, as long as it matches your EQ and also your
Mm,
spiritual quotient. I found out that people who have a little bit of more spirituality tend to handle different phases of their lives with more grace. So when you're
mhm.
aligning these three, and it could be low, it could be high, it doesn't really matter. As long as this is in proportion, you've got some solid people you can work with. And that what builds a very good team. I've noticed that the ones who usually have a problem somewhere along the line, they're missing a little bit on one or the curve is
Sure,
like this instead of being
I
straight.
could
So
see
I,
that.
I resonate profoundly with what you just said there. That's very important. Wow, Kevin, I hope we don't spend that much time not talking because I've really enjoyed this. So again, I'm going to invite you to come back whenever you want. I want to hear more from you guys because I know you're working on a heck of a lot of things, and we'll hear about it pretty soon. But I wanted to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And by the way, right where I used to live in Long Beach, where there's an amazing airport that is perfect for what you guys are doing because we've got the local food. We've got what used to be known as Polly's Gourmet Cafe. Now it's Sheldrake Roastery. And if you know anything about this place, it's heaven. Yeah, anyway, there are a lot of stories to be said about that, but you get the local food there. That's what I meant. This is wonderful. It's an amazing place to be. So I wanted to
I
thank you
love
for
it.
being with us today. That was really wonderful.
Well, so thank you for having me here. Thanks.
Absolutely. So we look forward to seeing you again. And for everybody listening out there, has this changed maybe your perception of what advanced air mobility is? Or let's call it now innovative air mobility. I like that much better. Or electric air mobility. Does that change your view? Do you understand more of it? What do you think of Ampere? Give us your ideas. Hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and share, share, share. We look forward to hearing from you very soon again. Thank you.